The morning Clara's uncle placed a marriage certificate on the table in front of her, she did not cry. She had learned a long time ago that tears were a luxury this house never allowed her. But what nobody in that room knew, what nobody could have known, was that the man they were handing her to like a bill payment was about to change everything. And she was about to change him right back. The certificate had already been signed at the bottom. Her uncle's signature, not hers. Clara stood in the center of the living room in a house that had never felt like home. 6 people watched her, neighbors, her cousin Rena, and Uncle Bode himself, standing near the window like he had just completed a business deal. You will marry Ji Chan Woo on Saturday, he said. This is how the debt is cleared. The name dropped into the room like a stone into still water. Ji Chan Woo, the Korean businessman who had moved into the old Adiemi estate 2 years ago. The man the street said had broken 3 men's careers with one phone call. The man the market women whispered about, he has blood on his hands. He came here running from something. The man whose own associates refused to look him in the eyes. Clara looked at her uncle, then at Rena, who was already smiling at her phone screen, already composing a caption in her head. Clara did not argue, not because she had accepted it, because she had lived in this house for 7 years and she already knew something Uncle Bode did not. She kept a notebook. Under the loose floorboard beneath her bed, wrapped in a black polythene bag, was a small brown notebook, not a diary, not complaints. Numbers, dates, names. 7 years of watching money move through this house in ways that did not match what Uncle Bode said out loud. She had never planned to use it until now. If you already knew Clara was the dangerous one in that room, drop "she knew" in the comments right now. He arrived 2 days before the wedding in a car that was old but clean. No convoy, no bodyguards, just him. Ji Chan Woo stepped out of the vehicle and looked at the compound the way a man looks at a place he has already calculated, quietly, completely, missing nothing. He was tall, sharp jaw, eyes that did not perform anything. When Uncle Bode introduced Clara, Ji Chan Woo looked at her the way no one in this house ever had. Not through her, at her. He extended his hand. His handshake was firm, not aggressive, the handshake of a man who had spent years doing real work and had not pretended otherwise. He said only 4 words. I know this is difficult. Not an apology, not a performance. Just a fact stated plainly, like he had decided she deserved at least that much. Clara said nothing. But she noticed 2 things. His watch was expensive, the kind that did not advertise itself. And his shoes, though worn at the heel, were polished to a mirror finish. A careless man does not polish worn shoes. She filed that away. That evening, alone in her room, she opened the brown notebook to the last written page. Read it once. Then turned to the blank page behind it and pressed her palm flat against the paper without writing anything. She was not planning an escape. She was preparing to walk through an unknown door with every single part of herself intact. What she did not know yet, what would not become clear until much later, was that Ji Chan Woo had also noticed something about her. When he looked at her, she did not look away. In 2 years of living in this city, almost no one had been able to do that, and the wedding was quiet and deliberately small. Uncle Bode had made sure of it, not out of modesty, but control. Borrowed chairs, a canopy from the church down the road, and a gathering that looked like a favor being repaid rather than a celebration. Rena appointed herself photographer. She moved through the small crowd, narrating under her breath, "My cousin is getting married today," wishing her happiness. She had already planned the caption. At the moment of the ring, Clara's hand did not shake. Neither did his. They looked at each other with the particular understanding of 2 people who both knew exactly what this was and had separately decided to remain standing through it. After the ceremony, while Uncle Bode held court near the food table, Rena appeared at Clara's side with a sweet smile. "Sis, let me hold your ID documents." Things go missing at events like this. Clara looked at her cousin. There was no reason to say no in front of everyone without causing a scene. She handed them over. Rena slipped them into her bag and disappeared into the crowd. Near the gate, Uncle Bode watched and gave the smallest nod. Clara saw it. She said, she simply moved the brown notebook that same evening from beneath the floorboard to a new hiding place, inside the lining of the old suitcase she was taking to her new home. Some weapons, she had learned, were best kept invisible until the exact right moment. Ji Chan Woo's compound was not what the street had described. No broken things, no smell of anger. A clean yard. A kitchen that looked like someone cooked seriously and cleaned deliberately. Books stacked on a shelf near the door, real books, worn at the spine. No bottles. No violence on the walls, just quiet. Clara did not trust rumors. She investigated them. In the first 2 weeks, she went to the market every morning and asked questions sideways, the way she had always gathered truth, lightly, like she was just making conversation. The first rumor, Ji Chan Woo had destroyed 3 men's businesses. She found one of them, a supplier who now ran a small shop in the next district. He did not want to talk. Then he said, he caught me falsifying delivery records for 2 years. I was furious. A pause. But he wasn't wrong. The second rumor, he had fled Korea with blood on his hands. A retired diplomat who had lived in the estate for years said quietly, he left because he refused to sign off on a deal that would have buried 20 smaller families. He lost everything for it. His own partners turned on him. The third rumor, the one about him being dangerous, collapsed the fastest. A security man at a private club on the mainland remembered clearly. A young waitress had been cornered in a back corridor by a senior guest. Most people at the event looked away. Ji Chan-woo was the only one who walked over. Was he wrong? The security man said, and shrugged like the answer was obvious. Clara came home that evening and sat at the kitchen table. She did not share any of what she had found with Ji Chan-woo. She was not ready to trust. Not yet. But she had stopped seeing a criminal. She was beginning to see a man who kept paying prices that were not his to pay, quietly, without asking for recognition. That was a different thing entirely. It was Uncle Bode's visit that changed everything. He arrived unannounced on a Wednesday, wearing his best agbada, carrying a small bag of provisions like he was performing generosity. He sat across from Ji Chan-woo in the living room and spent 40 minutes explaining, in his warmest voice, that as Clara's senior family member, he was the right person to represent Ji Chan-woo's business interests in any dealings that required a trusted community name. I have connections, Uncle Bode said. I know people. Let me be useful to you. Ji Chan-woo looked at him for a long moment. I will think about it, he said simply, and smiled, just slightly. Uncle Bode went home satisfied, certain he had planted a seed. That evening, Ji Chan-woo told Clara exactly what had happened, plainly, watching her face as he spoke. Clara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 10 full seconds. Then she stood up, walked to the bedroom, unzipped the lining of the old suitcase, and came back with a small brown notebook. She set it on the table. What is this? He asked. 7 years, she said. Every transaction I watched passed through my uncle's hands that didn't match what he said out loud. I don't know if you need it, but you should know what kind of person just sat in your living room. She said it without drama, without asking for anything in return. Ji Chan-woo opened the notebook, turned through the pages slowly, dates, figures, names, quiet observations written in careful handwriting. He set it down. He looked at his wife, not the way he had been looking at her before, measuring, cautious. Something had shifted. When Clara handed him that notebook, everything changed. Type she trusted first if you felt that moment. It was late. The compound was quiet. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, not as strangers anymore, but not yet as anything they had a name for. What were you actually convicted of? Clara asked. In Korea. Securities fraud, he said. According to the charge sheet. Did you do it? The question stayed in the room. No. Then why didn't you fight it? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because fighting it the way I needed to would have destroyed an old man who had served my father's company for 25 years. A man who had nothing to do with any of it. They threatened to drag him in if I kept pushing. He said it without self-pity, without asking her to admire him for it. Clara nodded slowly. She did not ask who the old man was, did not push for more than he had offered. You're not going to ask more, he said. You've said's enough, she answered. Outside, the night wind moved through the compound. The kitchen light swayed once and steadied. Neither of them moved. Clara thought about 7 years of waking before everyone else. 7 years of being the last one thanked, the first one blamed, the one who kept the house running while everyone pretended she was barely there. She had survived all of it without breaking. And here was a man who had done the same thing in a different country, at a different cost, and never told a soul. She looked at him. He looked back. The old man, she said quietly. Is he safe? Ji Chan-woo's expression shifted in a way she had not seen before. He's the one holding the evidence, he said, and I think it's almost time. Uncle Bode had never been a patient man. 3 weeks after his visit to the compound, he made his move. He went to the government registry with Clara's identity documents, the ones Rena had collected on the wedding day, and signed papers in Clara's name. He represented himself as the authorized family contact for Ji Chan-woo's household, and used that representation to access a federal supply contract that had been advertised publicly. He called Rena afterward. I am much smarter than that girl ever was, he said. Rena laughed. She never even knew what she had living under her roof. What they did not know, Ji Chan-woo had already made one phone call to Seoul, to Mr. Pak, his father's chief financial officer, who had spent 2 years in a quiet apartment in Busan holding a briefcase that contained every fabricated document, every forged record, every recorded conversation that proved Ji Chan-woo had been framed by his own business partners. Is everything still there? Ji Chan-woo had asked. Every single file, Mr. Pak said. Exactly as you left it. Then it's time. When Clara came home that evening and found Mama Soe, Ji Chan-woo's quiet, sharp-eyed housekeeper, waiting at the gate with the news about Uncle Bode's visit to the registry, She called Ji Chan-woo before she had even taken off her shoes. She told him everything. 3 seconds of silence on the line. Then his voice, completely calm, don't do anything. Just leave it alone. Like a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment for 2 years. The venue was a private business hall in Victoria Island. Ji Chan-woo had arranged it through his Lagos legal team, a formal event, press, officials, and every major contractor Uncle Bode had approached in the past 3 weeks. The stated purpose, the signing of a significant private infrastructure partnership. Uncle Bode arrived 40 minutes early in his best Agbada. Rena walked beside him in shoes she had bought specifically for this occasion. Clara arrived separately. She sat at the back of the hall in a plain dress. No escort. Ji Chan-woo had told her only one thing before they left the compound that morning. Sit at the back. You will want to see this. The hall filled fast. Then the lawyer at the front spoke. Before we proceed, we must address a legal matter regarding the fraudulent use of identity documents and unauthorized representation. The screen came on. Clara's forged signature beside her real one from her employment records. Photos of Uncle Bode at the registry. Recorded calls between him and 3 contractors over the past 3 weeks. Every move documented. Uncle Bode stood up. This is a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, the lawyer said quietly. Then the side doors opened. Mr. Pack walked in, 70 years old, carrying a briefcase, moving like a man who had carried something heavy for a very long time and had finally been given permission to set it down. He opened the briefcase on the table, fabricated records, forged emails, a recorded phone call in which Ji Chan-woo's former Korean partners directed someone to alter financial documents and frame a named individual. The room went silent. Ji Chan-woo walked in through the main doors. Dark suit. No performance. He walked to the front without looking anywhere but forward. Mr. Pack turned to the room. The lawful owner of Woo Group International, Mr. Ji Chan-woo. The room stood. Drop he waited for this in the comments if you knew from the beginning he was playing the long game. The hall had emptied by the time they were finally alone in it. They sat across from each other at a small table near the window, the Lagos skyline behind the glass, the last of the afternoon light coming in flat and quiet. You knew my uncle would do that, Clara asked. I knew what kind of person he was, Ji Chan-woo said. The first time I sat across from him. I didn't know exactly what he would do, but people like him always do something. A pause. What I didn't know was where you would be standing when it happened. I did nothing, she said. I know. He looked at her. You just stood straight. That was everything. She was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? He did not look away. Because I needed to know who you were before you knew who I was. 7 years of being the girl in the back room. 7 years of being known as the obligation, the burden, the niece nobody asked about. She understood exactly what he meant. She had needed to be seen before the title arrived. So had he. Clara nodded, not angry, just understanding. Uncle Bode was arrested before he reached his car. The charges were specific and documented. Rena left the city 3 days later with one bag. Nobody went after her. Mr. Pack retired to a small house Ji Chan-woo bought him near the coast. Not as payment, but because it was right, and because a man who holds justice steady for 2 years in a quiet apartment deserves more than a handshake. 6 months later, on a Tuesday morning, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she had made for herself. Ji Chan-woo came in from outside, set a second cup down in front of her without being asked, and sat across from her with a folder of documents under his arm. He opened it. She drank her tea. Neither of them said anything. Not because there was nothing to say. Because nothing needed saying. This was the thing 7 years of noise had never given her. Not the title. Not the office on the 14th floor of the Woo Group Tower. Not the moment the room stood up. This, a Tuesday morning, cup of tea. A man who saw her before he knew her name. Clara reached into the drawer beside the table and placed the brown notebook on the surface between them. She did not open it. She just looked at it for a moment, the worn cover, the careful handwriting inside, 7 years of truth she had kept for herself because there was no one to give it to. Then she slid it gently to the side. She did not need it anymore. Ji Chan-woo watched her do it. He said nothing, but he reached across the table and covered her hand with his, not pulling her anywhere, not asking for anything, just present. She did not move away. Some people are made to carry everything alone until the day the right person finally sits down across from them and says, without a single word, I see you. I have always seen you, and I am not going anywhere.